Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, Chapter 9, The Mock Turtle's Story. "You can't think how glad I am to see you again, you dear old thing," said the Duchess, as she touched her arm affectionately to Alice's, and they walked off together. Alice was very glad to find her in such a pleasant temper, and thought to herself that perhaps it was only the pepper that had made her so savage when they had met in the kitchen. "When I'm a duchess," she said to herself, in a not very hopeful tone, "I won't have any pepper in my kitchen at all. Soup does very well without it. Maybe it's always pepper that makes people hot-tempered," she went on, very much pleased at having found a new kind of raw, "and vinegar that makes them sour, and caramel that makes them bitter, and barley sugar and such things that make children sweet-tempered. I only wish people knew that. Then they wouldn't be so stingy about it, you know." She had quite forgotten that the Duchess, by this time, and was a little bit startled when she heard her voice close to her ear. "You're thinking about something, my dear, and that makes you forget to talk. I can't tell you just now what kind of moral that is, but I shall remember it in a bit." "Perhaps it hasn't one," Alice remarked. "Tut, tut, child," said the Duchess. "Everything's got a moral, if only you can find it." And she squeezed up closer to Alice's side as she spoke. Alice did not like keeping so close to her. First, because the Duchess was very ugly, and secondly, because she was exactly the same height to rest the chin upon Alice's shoulder. It was a very uncomfortable, sharp chin. However, she didn't like to be rude, so she bore with it as well as she could. "The game's going on rather better now," she said, by way of keeping the conversation a little. "'Tis so," said the Duchess, "and the moral of that is, oh, 'tis love that makes the world go round. Somebody said," Alice whispered, "that it's done by everybody minding their own business." "Ah, well, it means much the same thing," said the Duchess, digging her sharp chin into Alice's shoulder as she added, "and the moral of that is, take care of the sense, and the sounds will take care of themselves." How fond she is of finding morals in things, Alice thought to herself. "I dare say you're wondering why I haven't put my arm around your waist," the Duchess said after a pause. "The reason is that I'm rather doubtful about a temper with Flamingo. Shall I try the experiment?" "He might bite," Alice cautiously replied, not feeling as anxious at all to have the experiment tried. "Very true," said the Duchess. "Flamingos and mustard both bite, and the moral of that is, birds of a feather flock together." "Only mustard isn't a bird," Alice remarked. "Right as usual," said the Duchess. "What a clever way you have of putting things." "It's a mineral, I think," said Alice. "Of course it is," said the Duchess, who seemed ready to agree with anything that Alice said. "There's a large mustard mine near here, and the moral of that is, the more there is of mine, the less there is of yours." "Oh, I know," Alice exclaimed, who quite hadn't listened to that last remark. "It's a vegetable. It doesn't look like one, but it is." "I quite agree with you," said the Duchess, "and the moral of that is, be what you would seem to be, or if you like it put more simply, never imagine yourself not to be otherwise than what is, it might appear to others that what you were, or might have been, was not otherwise than what you had been would have appeared to them to be otherwise." "I think I should understand that better," said Alice very politely, "if I had it written down, but I can't quite follow it as you say it." "That's nothing to what I could say if I chose," the Duchess replied in a pleased tone. "Please, pray don't trouble yourself to say it any longer than that," said Alice. "Oh, don't talk of trouble," said the Duchess. "I make you a present of everything I've said as yet." "A very cheap sort of present," thought Alice. "I'm glad they don't give birthday presents like that," but she did not venture to say it out loud. "Thinking again?" the Duchess asked, with another sharp dig of her little chin. "I've a right to think," said Alice sharply, for she was beginning to feel a little worried. "Just about as much right," said the Duchess, "as pigs have to fly, and the more—" But here, to great surprise, The Duchess's voice died away, even in the middle of her favourite word, moral, and the arm was linked into hers began to tremble. Alice looked up, and there stood the Queen in front of them, with her arms folded, frowning like a thunderstorm. "Now I gave you fair warning," shouted the Queen, stamping on the ground as she spoke. "Either you or your head must be off, and that in about half no time. Take your choice." The Duchess took her choice and was gone in a moment. "Let's get on with the game," the Queen said to Alice, and Alice was too much frightened to say a word, but she followed her back to the croquet ground. The other guests had taken advantage of the Queen's absence and were resting in the shade. However, the moment they saw her, they hurried back to the game, and the Queen merely remarked about a moment's delay would cost their lives. All the time they were playing, the Queen never left off quarrelling with the other players and shouting, "Off with his head! Off with her head!" Those whom she sentenced were taken into custody by the soldiers, who, of course, had to leave their archers to do this, so that by the end of half an hour or so, there were no archers left, and all the players except the Queen, the King, and Alice were in custody and under sentence of execution. Then the Queen left off, quite out of breath, and said to Alice, "Have you seen the mock turtle yet?" "No," said Alice. "I don't even know what a mock turtle is." "It's a thing mock turtle soup is made out from," said the Queen. "I've never seen one or heard one," said Alice. "Come on, then," said the Queen. He shall tell you of his history." As they walked together, Alice heard the King say in a low voice to the company generally, "You are all pardoned." "Come, that is a good thing," she said to herself, for she had felt quite unhappy at the number of executions that the Queen had ordered. They soon came upon a griffin, lying fast asleep on the ground. If you don't know what a griffin is, look at the picture. And for those who don't have a picture, a griffin is half bird, well, falcon, half lion. The front body, is of a falcon, so the head, the claws, and the wings, and the back half, back legs, tail, most of its torso, is of a lion. All complaints, give to mythicalcreatures.com. "Up, lazy thing," said the Queen, "and take this young lady to see the mock turtle and to hear his history. I must go back and see after some of the executions I have ordered." And she walked off, leaving Alice alone with the griffin. Alice did not quite like the look of the creature, but on the whole she thought it would be quite as safe to stay with it as to go after the savage Queen. So she waited. The griffin sat up and rubbed its eyes. Then it watched the Queen till she was out of sight. Then it chuckled. "What fun!" said the griffin, half to itself, half to Alice. "What is the fun?" said Alice. "Why, she," said the griffin. "It's all her fancy, that. They never execute anyone, you know. Come on." "Everyone says come on here," thought Alice, as she went slowly after it. "I was never so ordered about it in my life, never." They had not gone far before they saw the mock turtle in the distance, sitting sad and lonely on a little ledge of rock. And as they came nearer, Alice could hear him sighing, as if his heart would break. She pitied him deeply. "What is his sorrow?" she asked the griffin, and the griffin answered very nearly in the same words as before. "It's all his fancy, that. He's got no sorrow, you know. Come on." So they went up to the mock turtle, who looked at them with large eyes full of tears, but said nothing. "This young lady here," said the griffin, "wants to know about your history, she do." "I'll tell it to her," said the mock turtle in a deep, hollow tone. "Sit down, both of you, and don't speak a word till I've finished." So they sat down, and nobody spoke for some minutes. Alice thought to herself, "I don't see how he could ever finish if he doesn't begin." But she waited patiently. "Once," said the mock turtle at last with a deep sigh, "I was a real turtle." These words were followed by a very long silence, broken only by an occasional exclamation of from the griffin and the constant heavy sobbing of the mock turtle. Alice was very nearly getting up and saying, "Thank you, sir, for such an interesting story," but she couldn't help thinking there was more to come, so she sat still and said nothing. "When we were little," the Mock Turtle went on at last, more calmly, though still sobbing a little now. And then we went to school in the sea. The master was an old turtle. We used to call him Tortoise. Why did you call him Tortoise if he wasn't one? Alice asked. We called him Tortoise because he taught us, said the Mock Turtle angrily. Really, you are very dull. You ought to be ashamed of yourself for asking such a simple question, added the Gryphon. And then they were both silent and looked at poor Alice, who felt she ready to sink into the ground. At last the Gryphon said to the Mock Turtle, Drive on, old fellow. Don't be all day about it. And he went on in these words. Yes, we went to school in the sea, though you may not believe it. I never said I didn't, Alice interrupted. You did, said the Mock Turtle. Hold your tongue, added the Gryphon before Alice could speak again. The Mock Turtle went on. We had the best of educations. In fact, we went to school every day. I've been to day school, said Alice. You'd need to be proud as all that. With extras? Asked the Mock Turtle a little anxiously. Yes, said Alice. We learned French and music. And washing? Said the Mock Turtle. Certainly not, said Alice indignantly. Ours and yours wasn't a really good school, said the Mock Turtle in a tone of great relief. Now, as ours, they had at the end of the bill French, music, and washing extra. You couldn't have wanted it much, said Alice, living at the bottom of the sea. I couldn't afford to learn it, said the Mock Turtle with a sigh. I only took the regular course. What was that? Alice inquired. Reeling and reefing, of course, to begin with, the Mock Turtle replied. And then the different branches of arithmetic, ambition, distraction, uglification, and derision. I've never heard of uglification, Alice ventured to say. What is it? The Gryphon lifted up both its paws in his surprise. What? You've never heard of uglifying? It exclaimed. You know what beautifies, I suppose. Yes, said Alice doubtfully. It means to make anything prettier? Well then, the Gryphon went on, if you don't know what uglify is, you are a simpleton. Alice did not feel encouraged to ask any more questions about it, so she turned to Mock Turtle and said, What else did you learn? Well, there was mystery, the Mock Turtle replied, counting off the suffrage and flappers. Mystery, ancient and modern, with seaography, then drawing. The old drawing master was an old conger eel that used to come over once a week. He taught us drawing, sketching, and fainting in coils. What was that like? Said Alice. Well, I couldn't show it to you myself, the Mock Turtle said. I'm too stiff, and the Gryphon never learnt it. Hadn't time, said the Gryphon. I went to classics masters, though. He was an old crab, he was. I never went to him, the Mock Turtle said with a sigh. He taught laughing and grief, they used to say. So he did, said the Gryphon, sighing in his turn, and both creatures hid their faces in their paws. And how many hours a day did you do these lessons? Alice said, in a hurry to change the subject. 10 hours the first day, said the Mock Turtle, 9 the next, and so on. What a curious plan, Alice exclaimed. That's the reason they're called lessons, the Gryphon remarked, because they lesson from day to day. This was quite a new idea to Alice. Thought it over a little before she made her next remark. And then the 11th day must have been a holiday. Of course it was, said the Mock Turtle. Then how did you manage on the 12th? Alice went on eagerly. That's enough about the lessons, the Gryphon interrupted in a decided tone. Tell her about the games now. That was Chapter 9, the Mock Turtle story of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. Coming soon, Chapter 10, the Lobster Quadrille. I hope you liked it.